please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Home Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you. New Thought Media Network proudly presents the Science of Mind Saturday Conversations. Learn more about the Science of Mind philosophy, faith, and way of life. Join our team of experts for a weekly deep dive discussion. Come study the Science of Mind, chapter by chapter, and resources from the Science of Mind archives. Plan to join us every Saturday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time, only on the New Thought Media Network.
Hey, everybody. Woo! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Oh my goodness, it's all good. And I am so glad that we get to hang out for the next 45 minutes or so right here on the New Thought Media Network, talking about the science of mind. My name is Dr. Tracy Brown, and I haven't been with you on a Saturday in quite a while. It seems like a year, even though I know it's only been a few weeks. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity, those of us who are on the team, to engage with you about the content in the book, The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science. Today, we are going to be talking about Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the mind, the greatest discovery. Mind, the greatest discovery. And this really is a perfect time to get into it. Last week, it was Chapter 1, in the beginning, God. And then in Chapter 2, Ernest Holmes begins to unpack what is really happening in order to manifest. What is really happening when humanity is manifesting. So if you're ready to dive in, please feel free to stop and drop a hello in the chat or in the comment section, depending on which platform you are on. And throughout our time together, you can use the chat or the comment section to ask questions, to share your own examples of how this philosophy works in your life, and to just say hello. So, hey, Shay, so glad to see you. And And I can see there's some other folks hanging out on the different platforms. And so if you'd like to say hello to, that would be great. So when we talk about science of mind in general, but I find for some reason in this chapter especially, it's easy to get hung up on some of the language. So I do want to just take 30 seconds and just alert you, kind of an inoculation, get you ready for what's coming in the chapter. So before we dive in, throughout this chapter especially, Ernest Holmes uses man, men, him, mankind a lot because of what he is trying to explain. And in some of the chapters, I often will just translate verbally into more gender neutral language. But it feels like in this chapter, it's important to leave it and to remember that in the 1900s and the 1920s, the 19 teens and the 1920s, when he was writing this book, it was common practice to use man as an all-inclusive term. If it is helpful for you, you can easily translate in your own mind man to humanity or humankind or people, all people. But because this chapter is so dense, and I know I'm not going to be able to go through all of it, I'm going to mostly use the language as it is written. So that may sound like a little bit of a disclaimer, but I just want to prepare you so that you're not confused as we're going through. So chapter 2, Mind, the Greatest Discovery, begins on page 71 and goes through page 80. And so I am clear that I'm not going to be able to really highlight every single page because on every single page there's some big stuff. So I do like to overview what is going on in the chapter though. And so let me pull that up because I think it'll be helpful for you to just see how he has laid it out. So there are 11 or 12 different subsections in the chapter. So nature waits on man's self-recognition, the first great discovery, the greatest discovery of all time, mind, memory, science. There is a section on how laws are discovered and the science of mind and how that fits into this whole conversation. Where do we get our mental impressions, reading, thought, mental laws, the threefold nature of God, and the Trinity of being? So yeah, there's no way I'm going to get into detail about all of these, but this gives you a little bit of a sense of the flow. And I know I will spend quite a bit of time on the first 2 or 3 and the last 2 or 3, but I may jump over or only do a reference to the ones in the middle. So let's dive in. So when Ernest Holmes talks about nature waits for man's self-recognition, on page 71 in the second paragraph, one of the sentences that I chose to highlight and have highlighted over and over and over again when I'm working with this. Is this sentence: if man is endowed with the attributes of self-choice and free will, he must be allowed to make this great discovery for himself. So before that, as he's getting into the chapter, I'll read you the paragraph or the few lines before that. In studying the order of man's evolution, it seems certain that it was necessary from the time that he was brought to a point of self-choice that he be left alone to discover his true nature. If man is endowed with the attributes of self-choice and free will, he must be allowed to make this great discovery for himself. Even God could not make a mechanical individual. And so lots of people quote that parts of that in order for humanity to actually evolve, it has to become self-aware, that it can make choices, and that it is able to tap into the way the world works and move forward through life, contributing to life. And in that sense, humans are not automated or programmed for specific outcomes. And the greater your own self-awareness and your consciousness about how universal law works, the more you can use it. And so this whole chapter really is about, once we become conscious and aware, right, that our thoughts are things that we are able to think and choose, then we become responsible. And that's one of the things that a lot of people bristle about in the context of science of mind specifically and new thought in general. Many people don't like the idea that, I can no longer pretend that I have no responsibility for what I do, the choices I make, the direction that my life unfolds. And I don't want that responsibility, so I will go and do something else. But for those of us who love the challenge and the responsibility, taking responsibility for our own lives individually and collectively, we actually are like, yes, this is one of the reasons that I love science of mind, the philosophy, the faith, and the way of life. So Ernest Holmes, and this is chapter 2, right? There were 4 introductory summary chapters, and then chapter 1, and now chapter 2. So we are very early in the book, and he is already putting it on a platter right in front of us, that it is our responsibility, and that is the design. So it's not the heaviness of responsibility, but the design is that we make the great discovery for ourselves. So then he immediately goes into, what is the first great discovery? The first great discovery is that man can think. That it's not just automatically going to happen, that we have the ability to think. And that the day when humanity said, or a human being said, I am, I am, this is me, and me, I'm different from you, and I'm different from the lions, and I'm different from the mountains. From that day, man became an individual and then had to make all further progress through the self. this really isn't that hard of a concept to understand, at least not on the surface level. It's not that challenging of a concept. And we even have some examples that we probably could think about, even though they're not quite complete examples. But when I think about a child, a human child, and when they are first born, they are completely dependent upon parents or adults who are with them, who are raising them, feeding them, changing them, and they often will behave in a way that really is, I am a part of you, I'm just an extension of you, or you are just an extension of me. We're one symbiotic unit, and not having that sense of not separation in a bad way, but separation, individuation, maybe that's a thing. And that sense of individuation doesn't come for a while. Some of what's happening when the toddler's between 18 months and 2 years old and start saying no, that's kind of the beginning, the foundation of a baby transforming into recognizing, oh, wait, I get to decide. Oh, I can make a decision. Oh, I am that I am. Now, obviously, they at 18 months to 2 years old, they don't have the full concept, but in some ways, that's the beginning. So when I think of early on in my spiritual journey, beginning to truly recognize that I have choices to make that will drive how I show up. And I want to make those choices in alignment with who I really know I am. A child of God, a child born as a person, born as a blessing, a person who is able to utilize spiritual law to design my life. And it's like, oh, I have to choose, and the universe will respond to what I choose and deliver that or deliver more of that. So the recognition that I am that I am, or that I am an individuation, an individualized expression of the perfection, wow, that is partly a big part of what helps me begin to think for myself, and ideally to do that in alignment with spiritual values, spiritual principles, spiritual laws. So this chapter 2, Mind, the Greatest Discovery, just Ernest Holmes walks us through that, having laid that foundation in the first 2 sections. If the great discovery is that I am, he then goes on to describe what he believes is the greatest discovery. You first have to identify that I am, right? But he says, then, however, a day came when someone wise claimed, oh, it's not the brain that does the thinking. For if the brain could think, it would keep on thinking even once it had been removed from the body. So it's not our brain that is actually thinking, but the discovery that there must be something or someone that is doing the thinking. And who would that be? So on page 73 in paragraph 2, it's this quote, and he goes on to write, "Yet without a brain, a man could not think," which proved that something behind the brain used it as an instrument. The brain is just an instrument to facilitate the process of thinking and deciding. Ernest Holmes continues, "But where is the thinker? We do not see him. Have we a right to say there is a thinker when we have never seen him? Yes, for the proof of this reality is the evidence of his thought. In back of the organism is the thinker and the doer, the mind, capital M, mind. This was the greatest discovery of all time, for it meant that the body without the thinker could not function." Repeating. This was the greatest discovery of all time, for it meant that the body without the thinker could not function. At first, man did not perceive this and thought only of his body as self-operating. But when he discovered this was not the case, he found he could consciously think and decide, and that something happened to his thoughts after he thought them. They went somewhere and returned to him as memory. All right, just take a deep breath, because it's really simple, and at the same time, it's really complex, right? So we're thinking, and we often think it's our brain that's doing the thinking, but the brain can't operate on its own. When someone is dying, often before the physical body has stopped working, the medical team will announce that the person is brain dead. The brain has stopped working, but the body is still breathing, and organs are maybe in the process of shutting down. So the brain cannot operate by itself. There is something that is operating the brain. The brain becomes a tool that the capital M mind, the true essential self, is using the brain in order to store information, process information, retain information. But there's something else programming it, directing the thoughts, choosing the intentions or the direction of movement of consciousness. So this chapter, that's what it is all about. And if the brain is simply a tool, an instrument that is being used, it's like, oh, okay, I can process that, because what's happening in the brain is either the creation of memories or tapping into memories. So it's no surprise that the very next section in subsection in this chapter at the bottom of page 73 is titled Memory. Memory must be the storehouse of all ideas that have passed through my mind. Repeating, memory must be the storehouse of all ideas that have passed through my mind. Memory is active. It must be, because my thoughts come back to me. I was in a conversation yesterday. I called someone I haven't talked to in probably 2 years, and she'd been on my mind a lot. She had come up for several different reasons. I had thought about her, and I realized that I had been thinking about her a lot since mid-December because her birthday was in December. And I thought about calling her, but I got busy and I didn't. And since then, like over the last 8 or 9 weeks, I've thought about her at least once a week, and in the last week, every day. So I called her, and I realized every time that I thought about her, I had a memory of something we had done together, or a memory of an area that she has expertise in. And I wondered if she could give me some information that would be helpful about certain things. The memory of the connection she has with some other people I know, and wanting to make sure she was aware that someone she knew had made their transition, because I didn't know in her network who else might have known. And I was like, all of that is memory. Now, was it triggering? Was it acting on its own, the fact that I thought about her every week for the last 8 or 9 weeks? Or was it because I had said, and I had set a clear intention to call her or email her, to reach out to her in some way? Was it responding to my intention and, ticking off different things that are in my memory banks as a reminder for me to do something I had been very clear I wanted to do? If we think about memory as the storehouse of all ideas that have passed through our mind, then I believe I'm using it as an instrument to help me achieve what I am focused on. Now, in this case, my intention and the focus was something really positive, but what we know about all of these spiritual principles is that they're neutral. We're the ones who determine or judge good or bad, healthy or not healthy, helpful or not helpful. So if I were thinking about doing something that doesn't necessarily serve me, the memory is going to give me information or inspiration that supports that direction. But it's the thinker who sets the direction, consciously or unconsciously. I don't like saying that, but I know it is true. Because so often our mind or our intention is grounded in what we don't want, or how we don't want to behave, but that's where our attention is. And so the universe puts us in situations that allow us to fulfill that conscious or subconscious, unconscious thought. Now, we could stop right here. We really could. We could stop right here and talk for an hour about, well, how did I really show up? well, what do I do about it? Well, when was my memory and my mind, when were they, give me some examples of how they work together to deliver on what I'm thinking about, consciously or unconsciously. But there are, another 6 or 7 subsections in this chapter. And I want to give you the broad overview, because then maybe you'll go back and dive in and take it paragraph or 1 or 2 paragraphs at a time and really just read it and allow it to wash over you and allow examples that are true for you in your life. So I'm going to keep going on page 74. Oh, no. Well, I'm going to kind of keep going, but I want to read this. At the top of page 74, as he closes out the section on memory, this is one of the most important conclusions which the mind of man has ever made. By changing his thought, he could remold his affairs. And by right thinking, he could bring new conditions into his life. Tremendous. Tremendous. And so from memory, he goes on to science. And with science, Ernest Holmes, it's a 1 paragraph. And it's not even one of those really long Ernest Holmes paragraphs. It's 3 sentences only. That's the whole subsection. So I'm just going to read it to you. Subtitle: Science. Science is the knowledge of facts based upon some proven principle. The scientific investigation of anything is, of necessity, a cold-blooded proposition. We speak about knowing, about science being absolute knowledge. Science is absolute knowledge insofar as the facts of science are demonstrable. Now, I think he only does that sentence there with science because he does go into it a little more deeply in a couple of the following sections, but he makes this very declarative statement to remind us that we're talking about the science of mind and spirit. We're talking about how the law works. We're talking about universal principles. We're talking about absolute intelligence and manifestation and how it works. So he lays that 3-sentence foundation before going into the next section, how laws are discovered. In the scientific discovery of laws, certain theories are postulated, and those theories may develop through research and investigation. Right? Basic science and discovery, right? We have a thesis or a hypothesis, and then we run different tests or we do different research to either prove or disprove that thesis or that hypothesis. And so he writes at the bottom of page 74, any science consists of the number of known facts about its invisible principle. As more and more facts are gathered and proven, the science expands and gradually becomes accepted by all and may be used by those who understand it. Electricity is a principle, and it was working, and it was designed way before humanity understood it. But once we understood it, then we started to find uses for it. and ways to apply it that helped us live the kind of life we wanted to live. Right? Before we knew about technology and computers and how to make them work, the laws existed. Right? The way the technology works, if someone had discovered it and studied it and put all the pieces together 100 years earlier, great, because humanity didn't really create it. What we did was we had some theories about how to use communication and electricity and energy and how to create machines. And now everybody has a full-blown computer, not every single person, but in general, the masses in the population walk around with their own computer, their own technology right in their hands because we've learned to use it. We have accepted what technology, how we've learned so far to use technology. And in my lifetime, right, it has changed so much. But there are things I do now, like engage with you right here through a computer screen, and all of us are in places all over the world, and we can be in communication, in connection with one another without getting on a plane, a train, a boat, a bus. And we all use it, but we're using physical laws in order to tap into what is available to us. And Ernest Holmes is just reminding us that that's how laws are discovered, through studying them and then through using them and then applying them in our lives. Now, this may seem like a jump for some of you, but that science part plus then applying it and trying it out and testing it and expanding our use of it was a perfect lead in to where he goes next. He goes next to talk about the science of mind, because the science of mind is a science. It is a faith, it is a philosophy, and it is a way of life. But what we teach are the ways that spiritual law works so that we can tap into it. So he says, Ernest Holmes writes at the top of page 75 in the second paragraph, the science of mind then is the study of life and the nature of the laws of thought. Science of mind is the conception that we live in a spiritual universe and that God or Spirit is in us, is through us, is operating through us, is around us, and is always operating for us. The principles that we teach in Science of Mind are designed to help us understand, right, that God is always present. There is no spot where God is not, that God is the source of all life, and as so is operating in us, at us, through us, for us. So in this chapter, Mind, the Greatest Discovery, Ernest Holmes makes the connection that what we teach in Science of Mind is about understanding and then using our thoughts and the mind in order to achieve our goals. I have to stop and almost laugh at myself, at least smile, because, we're about halfway through the chapter, and in the next 5 to 8 minutes, I have to go through the rest of the chapter. So I'm just going to be giving you some highlights. And again, I hope these highlights inspire you to go to chapter 2 in the Science of Mind book by Ernest Holmes and read more for yourself. So, after the chapter on science of, or the subsection on science of mind, he goes to where do we get our mental perceptions? And there are a couple of key things that I do want to share there. He writes at the bottom of page 75, the paramount problem of philosophy now, as in the past, is how and from whence do we get our mental impressions? Kant says we are able to perceive an object because it awakens an intuitive perception within us. And how could we do that if or unless the idea or the perception or the intuition already existed within us? And so he does like a whole page and a half that is, it's something to be read slowly, even though I've read it many times. When I read it this morning to review the chapter, I was like, I had to read it 3 times. And I had to read it out loud because this part of the chapter, it's like circular logic. If this is true, then this must be true. And if this must be true, this must be true. And if this is true, then this is what's happening. And that leads us right back to here. But the main idea of it is that we get our mental impressions because, one, we are tapped into the infinite mind. And 2, since our brain is storing every experience that we've had and everything that we've learned, we get an intuitive hit about things and connect to them in whatever way has been primed. We've been primed to react to them, and we don't always know consciously what that is. But our mental impressions are not coincidental. And from this whole page and a half around mental impressions, he does a really brief 2-3 paragraph commentary about reading thought and telepathy. And he doesn't spend a lot of time there, but he builds a bridge that sometimes the things that we think are just synchronicities or coincidences are really the mental connection that exists because we all are tapped into universal mind. And then he goes into mental law and a real easy connection that if we think of the medium of radio transmission, for those of you who are old enough to remember having a radio and you manually adjusted the dial to get a clearer signal, that often is what is happening, that the mental absolute truth doesn't change. But as we are like tuning forks, or we have the ability to tune ourselves to be more in alignment with the truth or out of alignment with it. On page 78, I find his writing about the distinguishing factors between divine or universal mind and universal spirit interesting. Not mandatory, but if you've been studying science of mind for a while, I think you'll find it interesting because it's a little challenging to be like, oh, I see where there's overlap, and I see how they're different. But in the chapter that we are in, which is Mind, the Greatest Discovery, it's helpful so that you don't begin to conflate or confuse mind and mental activity with spirit, the absolute eternal expression of life, of all of life. But it's not mandatory. And then I do want to spend a few minutes, much time as I can, 3 minutes, on the last two sections in this chapter. So Ernest Holmes talks about mental law. Spirit is the power that knows itself. He did this actually a few page or so ago, toward the end of that section that I didn't go into too much detail on. Spirit is the power that knows itself. And there's an infinite law which knows how to do whatever needs to be done, but it doesn't care what it does. And we are directing what it does based upon what we tell it, what we think, what we are doing. And that requires us to understand the threefold nature of God. So Ernest Holmes on page 79 says, God is spirit, God is law, God is result. God is spirit, God is law, God is result. So spirit is like the self-knowingness, knowing that what I am thinking actually directs the flow, and I get to choose, and hopefully I'm choosing from the perspective of what is in alignment with spiritual law. God is law, the mystery, the invisible, that it's taking action on the intention I have set. And God is also the result that we often talk about in the body, not just the human body, but form, that, what the intention we've set is now being delivered in some form or some experience. And that is the same nature that spirit itself uses to create you and me and our dog and the mountain range and the ocean, deciding, dropping that into spiritual law, the invisible that makes it happen, and then seeing the tangible result. And when we remember that, then it keeps going, taking us back to mind. I have the ability to think. I have the ability to choose. I have the ability to decide. And that is what is happening. And that is why Ernest Holmes says that it is the greatest discovery. Now, there is an overlap that we don't want to skip in case it's important for you to build the bridge. And that overlap is when we say those three elements of being, it's very similar to, obviously, the Trinity of being that runs all nature and all life. And so if you have, or if you're familiar with a Christian mindset or Christian teaching, then you would be able to relate it to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, right? The Father, the thinking, the intending, the deciding. The Son would actually be the body or the manifestation, and the Holy Ghost is that invisible energy that is working on the intention in order to deliver the result. In Science of Mind, you may hear us talk about it as the thing itself, the way it works, what it does. But in any case, it is actually reminding us that the Trinity of being runs through all nature and all of life. And all that's happening is that we are learning to consciously use it. So I'm going to close out our time together with this quote that I love. Absolute intelligence working through absolute law delivers a customized manifestation. Absolute intelligence working through absolute law delivers a customized manifestation. It is the law or spirit, the thing itself, what it does, and how it works. Oh, there's so much more I could say, but I don't have time today. And I don't know if you could actually even take in any more all at one sitting. We had 3 hours to unpack it, take a break, do some playing with it with some examples maybe. But this is probably enough for the first overview. So please, throughout the week, if you have the Science of Mind textbook, pull it out, read chapter 2, and just let it marinate, because next week on Saturday Morning Science of Mind, we will be diving into chapter 3, which is about spirit, God, the universal truth, the absolute truth, and all that that means. I'm so glad that you hung out with me today. My name is Dr. Tracy Brown, and next week a different member of our team will be with you, but I want you to join us so that you can learn more about the Science of Mind and how to apply it in your life. Have a great rest of the weekend or the rest of the week, depending on when you are watching this, and we'll see you again real soon.